Why are property prices not falling in this crisis? That's today's topic, and let's dive into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode. For those who are tuning in for the first time, Nova Rise here is your channel for real estate education. So today it's going to be a follow-up to basically everything that has been going on in the market. I know I had a live a couple of months ago regarding this particular subject, and that refers to what's going on, what's happening to the prices in particular. So a couple of weeks ago, I created an episode where I talked about the areas where to invest during the crisis. And I also share a plan of action, right? Like if you're looking to finance your property, then you should buy now. And if you're looking to buy cash, then you should wait a couple of more months because I anticipate some of the prices going down. But it turns out that just with everything in any crisis, there are a lot of factors that come into play that actually created some new trends. Some of that historical data is still applying, but some of that is actually not applying due to the shift in the market. So you might have seen my past life as well, where I talked about an article related to the increase in house sales back in April, and it was an article from the Associated Press. So if you're interested in reading it, don't worry, I'm going to include a link down here in the description below. And that article in particular talked about basically a change in shift and how some of the things that we will normally expect to happen during a crisis is in fact not happening due to this new trend that's happening. At the same time, a couple of weeks ago, I also released an episode where I interview a Airbnb host. His name is Carrington Carter, where we talked about the new market trends of working from home. So this episode, it's actually a compilation and to help you basically depict everything, put everything in one single episode so you can see the bigger picture as to why exactly our price is not dropping. And for that, we're going to jump straight into my tablet. So basically what we have here, I want to draw a very clear distinction just to help you visualize everything that's going on, right? So we have properties right here, right? And then we're seeing two different shifts. One where the prices of the properties are going up, and one where the prices of the properties are actually going down. Now, why are certain prices going up in certain neighborhoods? Well, it all has to do with this new flexibility or this flexible work arrangement called work from home, right? Work from home. And this actually derived from the pandemic, right? And I'm sure you've seen it in the news. I'm sure you're seeing a lot of the shift. Unfortunately, some employees were laid off because the industry in itself had no need for them. Those, for example, those who actually work in retail, those who actually work in hospitality or any of the restaurant business, because their presence was actually required. And because of the business closure due to the pandemic, a lot of those were actually sent from home and hope for, for the pandemic restrictions to be lifted. However, there are some other companies who were able to stay open, and instead of having their staff coming home, they were actually given the opportunity to actually work from home. Now, due to this one phenomenon, or whatever you want to call it, a lot of people started asking themselves, okay, well, so what's the main reason why I will normally want to live in an expensive city like Los Angeles or New York City or Boston, whatever major metropolitan city? And the reason is proximity to work, right? You want to be relatively close to work where you get to commute hopefully less than an hour long so that you don't have to wake up so early, or that you have more time to do the stuff that you like perhaps exercising in the morning or meditating or even getting your kids ready to school, right? So now they don't have to worry about that whole commuting thing because they have the chance to work from home. I know that prior to everything that happened with the virus, it was an idea that was actually considered, but a lot of people thought that, hey, we're not there yet, maybe we need the infrastructure, but due to everything that happened with COVID, that actually got accelerated. So working from home got accelerated. A lot of the companies had to come up to speed. They have to put the processes. It was a painful growing process, but they managed to make it happen. And now people are thinking, well, why would I want to pay $3,000 worth of a rent when I can actually take that money and rent a bigger place, a much cheaper place at perhaps $2,000 or $1,500 out in the suburbs where my kids get to step out of the house. And yes, we're still in quarantine, but at least they get to breathe some fresh air and we don't have to worry about being so close to one another, which is usually the situation when you're in the big city. So that's one. Another reason why people are considering moving outside of the city to a much cheaper place, it's also due to the fact that we have a lot of people in big cities. So they're trying to keep their families protected. And at the same time, with everything that's been going on with the riots, that's another reason as to why they will prefer to move into an area that where there's not that much, let's say, quote unquote, action, so to speak, so that they can still be able to transition their families and their children to a relatively quiet lifestyle so they can continue to focus on their education, even though it's at home and via Zoom, but they can still focus on that as well. So on the opposite side, you might see that because prices are going up in what I like to call typically suburban areas, now you see a drop in prices in the metropolitan areas, right? Metropolitan areas. And for that, we're talking NYC, we are referring to Boston, cities like LA, and why not? Perhaps Philly, right? The more populated the city, the higher chances you have to getting exposed to the virus. So parents, for the most part, they are trying to prevent this from happening. And because of this particular reason, there are places where you will typically expect housing prices to go down. And what you see is the complete opposite. So for example, there are a lot of people who are actually migrating from New York City all the way to Connecticut, where they can actually afford a place that is much bigger and cheaper at the same time. They're somewhat relatively close to the city in case they need to hop back, but eventually they don't need to deal with that long commute anymore because of that flexibility. And so it is still too soon to tell what the market trend will be long term, but in the short term, relatively, we're talking about 6 to 9 months, this is the trend that is happening. And for those who are actually wondering about the article where I actually read that information, and I've also been monitoring the market. Like I said, I've been speaking to a couple of colleagues, of real estate investors. We've interviewed a real estate investor in this channel, Carrington Carter, with his Airbnb portfolio, and he's actually anticipated the same thing. So here is the article where I actually was making a reference to. You can read that at your own discretion. As you can see, Baltimore AP, U.S. new home sales ticked up to 0.6% in April. So this is a very interesting article. It talked about the reason as to why, even though some of us are afraid of stepping out, some of us are afraid of losing our jobs, some people are still managing to buy properties. Why? Because let's say, for example, if you have the opportunity to work from home and you are well aware that your role is actually critical to your company, chances are you will remain employed. So if you remember some of the concepts back in college, the supply and demand curve, right? So the lower the supply, the higher the demand. That means the prices will continue to go up or definitely not go down. So now back to the tablet. So what's happening, right? So the new trend in the AP article, we're talking about prices of the properties relatively either maintaining the same or going up. And at the same time, we're talking about demand or sales picking up, right? And so what this phenomenon could be attributed to is the fact that, once again, people are working from home, right? So people are working from home and you are pretty much saving about an hour or two of your daily commute. Your children are actually working from home. So you're sort of like maximizing your time more often than before. So there's only a certain amount of books, there's only a certain amount of Netflix that can actually keep you occupied. So people, in essence, they started basically just looking for properties, right? They can actually look at properties online by just taking virtual tours and basically maximizing your time in every way possible, because now you don't have to travel to that particular property to quote unquote check it out. Why? Because you don't want to expose yourself to a virus, and at the same time you just simply don't feel safe anymore. What if they don't clean it right? And I've been mandated to stay home in order to keep my family safe. So what they're doing is, instead of going out in the market and looking at, let's say for example, or houses where people have lived in there previously, what they're doing is that they're going into these new constructions areas, just like you see here, because in their mind, hey, I much rather go into a new house, which they're giving me a discount to begin with, rather than going into a house where someone has lived there before. I have no idea if they contracted the COVID virus or not. Perhaps someone might have even died in it. Who knows? And how do I know that they took the proper cleaning protocols to ensure that that house was safe? Meanwhile, here in these new construction houses, hey, I might not be able to move into it within the next 9 to 6 months, but hey, I have no rush because we're in the middle of a pandemic and we're told to stay home. So therefore, I much rather invest my money, buy a property that I know is not ready for me to move in yet, but I have no intentions of moving out anytime soon because of everything that's going on. So I got time, I got patient, and on top of that, it's like I'm getting a discount. So it's icing on the cake. So this is a very interesting article. I highly suggest that you read that. And then at the same time, another article that could definitely complement everything that I've been sharing with you today in order to give you a much better picture is this article right here from MSN. The title of the article basically just depicts everything I've just shared. More people considering moving out of expensive cities if they can work remotely. So I'll leave the links down here so that you can actually check them out. And once again, we're still relatively early in this trend. It is very difficult to predict what's going to happen long term, but in the short term, within 6 to 9 months, because of this new trend of working from home, this is one of the many explanations that can explain why in certain places the property prices are going up. They're not going down at all, and why in some other places, like for example in New York City, you're starting to see a decline in some of the property prices. I've been actually monitoring them since late March of this year all the way to we're now in mid-June, and property prices have in fact dropped 10%. So very, very interesting. If you're enjoying this episode, do not forget to hit the like button right here. And while I still have you here, make sure you check out this episode that I have right here. That's going to help you complement everything that you learned just today. And until then, I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Bye-bye.